You're listening to Current Position, a weekly briefing from Expeditors mapping the shifts across trade compliance, regulatory changes, and global supply chains. Plus, some air market insights from Senior Vice President of Global Air, Carl Francisco. I'm Chris Parker, and here is the latest from July 8th to July 14th. First, in global customs and trade, new regulations went into place June 30th in the European Union, allowing U.S.-made industrial goods to enter the EU with no customs duties. Regulations 2026-1455 and 2026-1461 removed the remaining EU customs duties, introduced preferential access for certain U.S. seafood and non-sensitive agriculture products through tariff rate quotas and reduced tariffs, and extend the suspension of duties on imports of lobster. Onto the ocean market. President Donald Trump plans for the U.S. to take on security control of the Strait of Hormuz after Iran re-engaged attacks on commercial traffic. Trump plans to block Iranian usage of the strait while charging other countries a 20% fee to transit the strait. Most recently, the IMO Council has affirmed that all vessels are to be given unimpeded passage on all international waterways, such as the Strait of Hormuz, with no one country managing passage. Spot rates in the ocean market remain high as uncertainty continues in the Middle East. According to data from Zenita, spot rates for routes from Asia to the U.S. West Coast and East Coast are up 276% and 232%, respectively, since attacks on Iran began earlier this year. The Mexico ports of Manzanillo and Lázaro Cárdenas are facing critical congestion levels. Several major ocean carriers have issued customer warnings of extensive transshipment delays and container backlogs at terminal yards at Manzanillo. This is expected to create container imbalances and instability for both ports, especially for services to Central America and South America. Onto the global air market. Impacts from typhoon disruptions and strong demand have created localized capacity pressure across intra-Asia. Capacity from Tokyo to Taipei and Incheon is tight due to weather and strong U.S.-bound transshipment demand via Korea. South Asia demand, particularly to Singapore, Bangkok, Penang, and Kuala Lumpur, is strong with carriers planning rate increases and requiring advanced bookings. Hong Kong also faces significant operational impact with typhoon-related cancellations, tightening capacity to Taipei and Shanghai Pudong and creating transit delays. South Asia demand remains very strong, particularly in Singapore, Bangkok, and Manila, with limited main deck capacity and ongoing freighter cancellations. World ACD data indicates volumes from Hong Kong to Europe did decline significantly moving into July and post-EU rule changes on de minimis shipments. Tonnage fell 12% week on week, following previous declines of 7% and 2%. Volumes from Asia-Pacific overall to Europe dropped 6% at the end of June into July. And finally, global ground transportation. Geopolitical uncertainty is keeping gas prices high. The average weekly diesel retail price recorded by the Department of Energy increased almost 22 cents per gallon to $4.796 per gallon. Experts say the increase does not bring prices back up from where they were 10 weeks ago, but indicators such as the price of ultra-low sulfur diesel or ULSD show markets are uncertain. Up next, Senior Vice President of Global Air Carl Francisco with his air market insights. Carl Francisco, Senior Vice President of Global Air at Expeditors. Welcome, and how are you doing?
Great. Thank you.
Wanted to start off here with just a very simple question. What has got your attention right now?
Yeah, I think everyone's interested to know, the effects of the war in the Middle East and how is that affecting, overall transportation when it comes to air and ocean. And since I'm in air, I'm also interested in knowing what's going on the air side in terms of capacity.
What are you seeing specifically?
Well, what we've seen now over the last 4 months, right, since the war started, is just uncertainty about what the airlines or the carriers will be faced with, managing their overall capacity and flight schedules and so on. It's a very fluid situation and it changes week to week. It is good to know that for the most part, most of the carriers in the Middle East, they're somewhat back to normal in terms of flying passengers as well as cargo, but you never know. That can change overnight.
Yeah, with like restricted airspace and things like that. What kind of situations have we seen so far?
Well, more lately, I think because of what happened with the ceasefire being lifted, there is activity going on in the Middle East as far as drones and what have you. And I think with the airlines that we work with the Middle Eastern carriers, They are somewhat restricted and they're limited in terms of where they can fly. They'll have to be careful with, avoiding the conflict areas, which means that, carriers might have to refuel or carry extra fuel for longer flights to get around the restricted areas,
Right.
which causes delays, obviously, and longer flight times with increased costs in terms of overall fuel costs.
And so what have our partners or carriers out there have had to do? I mean, obviously raising costs, adjusting capacity. What else are they doing to, I guess, stay afloat right now in this really uncertain time?
Really, they're just trying to get back to some normalcy right now in terms of passenger travel, because so much of what they do is focused around passengers as well as cargo, right? Just trying to get back to normal scheduling so that their customers can rely on, regular scheduled flights, the amount of capacity that they have available, and also doing that while trying to manage their cost, because it seems to be a real fluid situation right now.
Thinking about our customers and just other shippers out there, what has been going on for the last 4 months continues on another 4 months? What kind of results could we be seeing, or how could people be impacted?
Well, we've already seen a lot of other carriers within the region, adjust their schedules. Perhaps some of the non-Middle Eastern carriers were flying into the Middle East for a fuel stop or technical stop that they had to avoid over the last 3 months. So they've made some adjustments to their schedules in light of what's going on. And I don't think they're ready to resume the old schedules until the conflict is over. Right. So there is some disruption going on with freight in the region, and we expect that to continue for the unforeseeable future.
I mean, is that sustainable at all?
Yes and no. I would say yes in terms of, the airlines figuring out how to provide capacity to customers that need capacity right now. But in terms of cost, that is the most difficult thing to do, right? Because there's certain things that they just can't control, fuel being one of them.
So when we're thinking about either our customers, or like I said, other shippers out there, what kind of conversations or what things should they be paying attention to when working with their respective partners or working with their internal teams?
Yeah, I would say the most important thing is obviously working with your service provider in terms of providing that forecast, letting them know what you have down the pipe in terms of capacity that's required, just to minimize disruption as much as possible, right? So if the service provider is able to plan ahead, when I say plan ahead, they need more than a few days, and we're talking about weeks, it'll make it a lot easier to ensure that the cargo is protected in terms of capacity, while also looking for the most economical way of moving the cargo.
And what does risk look like now overall? I know capacity is tight. Fuel costs are high. I'm thinking about the safety of the cargo as well.
Yeah, I would say that, the worst is somewhat behind us. If you think about when the war started, the first week of March, we've seen fuel increase exponentially right out of the gates as the carriers struggle. We ran into some issues where potentially airlines could run out of fuel. And that was a big issue and a big concern. So I think that's behind us now with the ceasefire that took place. So it allowed some of the ships to get through and the crude oil to get to where it needed to get to be processed. So I would say the worst part is behind us. But the longer this goes on, you just never know. Yeah. It's really hard to plan ahead.
So just staying transparent with your providers,
meeting with our carriers on a regular basis, getting updates on a regular basis, making sure that we know what's going on, and then also meeting with our customers, more importantly, to understand, their shipping needs, their shipping patterns, and are they looking at large volume that they're going to be shipping in the coming weeks. So we want to make sure that we protect that space for them.
All right, closing thought here. What's getting you out of bed? What are you excited for right now, if anything? I know we've been kind of on a down note here, but anything optimistic that you're thinking about?
Well, I think overall, in general, demand seems to be holding quite strong year to date. Not really sure what's going to happen in the coming months, but, overall, I think cargo is moving. Hopefully costs will come down, as we see the conflict in the Middle East resolve, hopefully. But that's what I'm looking forward to, is trying to see the overall cost come down in terms of air freight. And we're not there yet, but hopefully we'll get there soon.
Thank you so much, Carl. Appreciate it.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chris.
You are now at our current position. Links to everything we covered today, plus some extra articles of interest, are in the show notes. And while you're there, check out the events and webinars we flagged for the weeks ahead. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.